Hey everybody, welcome to this week's live room of Locked On Bearcats. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name's Alex Frank, your host of Locked On Bearcats. In a matter of minutes, I'm going to be joined by my colleague at AllBearcats and Sports Illustrated, Russ Heltman. We're going to talk Bearcats football, the crucial defensive change coming for 2023, the offensive rebuild that the Bearcats could be in this offseason, heading into their first season in the Big 12, and we're going to recap the Bearcats' loss to Memphis on Sunday and look ahead to another crucial matchup Saturday at Houston. A reminder that today's live room and today's episode of Locked On Bearcats is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. It's been a great week here on Locked On Bearcats. Thank you to all of you who make us your first listen of every day. We are approaching 700 subscribers right here on Locked On Bearcats. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, lots to get to today. Looking forward to having Russ on as we do every Wednesday right here, 12:30 Eastern Time here on Locked On Bearcats. So the Bearcats football, there's a lot happening, and obviously this is the offseason. It's a long offseason, but there's still plenty to talk about, and there's still plenty to project. There's still plenty to talk about, think about. There's a lot. And I think what is interesting about the Bearcats program is that I do think, based on what happened last year with 29 first-year head coaches, and I think what happened last year with the fact that 17 of those teams had either 500 or better records, I think that the Bearcats are in good hands with an offensive-minded head coach. I think they're in good hands with the guys that they have been able to land in the transfer portal. I think they're definitely in good hands with retaining key players from last year's team, key hometown heroes, key hometown hero coaches like Walter Stewart and Kerry Combs. I think they hired good coaches at defensive and offensive coordinators. I think they are set up for a successful season next year. Now, what does a successful season mean to you? What does that constitute for you? I think the first thing is qualify for a bowl game. Like, the Bearcats have not had 6 straight winning seasons in nearly 70 years. The Bearcats have also made 13 bowl games in the previous 16 years. So you want to keep that streak going. 13 bowl games in 16 years is really, really good. Again, the Bearcats are not Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, all those blue blood schools. They've only been a good football program and at the top tier of college football, at the top tier for the last 5 years, and a really good program and a good program for the last 20 years. Ohio State has been a blue blood program for decades. Same with Alabama, same with USC, same with Notre Dame. Cincinnati is not that. So appreciate 13 bowl games in 16 years. Now, expectations are certainly going to be higher going into a Power 5 conference. You're going to have more opportunities to it's not going to be as difficult and nearly impossible to make the college football playoff once the Bearcats get back to that level. But one thing that is, I think, going to constitute success next year is not falling off a cliff, not going from 9-3 to 4-8. I don't think the Bearcats are going to have the same hardships in their first year under Scott Satterfield as they did under Luke Fickell. I think they're in really good shape in terms of being in the Power 5 conference. They've got upgrades to facilities coming. They have more resources. Russ is going to be with us here in a few minutes. So this is a program that is still, I believe, on solid ground. And I hope you feel the same way. I hope you feel the same way that I do about the Bearcats football program. I understand that change happens so suddenly. Here the Bearcats were in the college football playoff in 2021. This time last year, they were just coming off that playoff appearance. We were talking about, well, how do they reload to win a third straight conference championship and ride off into the sunset from their time in the American 10 years and go to the Big 12 with a lot of momentum? So that is what we were talking about. Now we're talking about, well, how are they going to rebuild the offensive line, which has been in position of strength for the last 5 years? How are they going to rebuild the wide receiver room, which really got good last year? How are they going to rebuild a lot of key positions on this roster? How are they going to rebuild? How are they? What's going to happen at quarterback? Is Emory Jones going to, is he the guy? I think he should enter the spring ball as the projected starter. But does Ben Bryant have a chance, even in a new system? Kudos for him, really, for sticking around. Because I'm going to be honest, I don't think his skill set fits Satterfield's system. Maybe they do. I don't know. But Bryant has got to become a more mobile quarterback. And maybe he's going to be, because the offensive line is going to allow him to be that. Evan Prater, he's still here. Yeah, he's a hometown hero. He's still here. There's a lot to like with Evan Prater. I'm excited to see what he can bring to the Bearcats, offense. If he can find a way to become the starter in 2023. And I think it's going to be very challenging because there are a lot of guys who are, in front of him that are experienced, that have great skill sets, and have simply played more college football than Evan Prater. And so when we think about it that way, I want to see him succeed. I want to see him have a role on this team, but it's going to be very difficult. Tweeting out the YouTube link that we are live again. This was, if you're listening to this in podcast form, yesterday at 12:30. So for future planning purposes, if you ever want to take a lunch break during your workday, or whatever you're doing at 12:30, maybe you're watching NFL Network, NFL Now, Conference Championship Sunday this week. 12:30 Eastern Time, yours truly and Russ Heltman. We talk Bearcats football, men's basketball, all things Bearcats. So feel free to join us. Every Wednesday at 12:30. We got it going on here on Locked On Bearcats. So plenty to get to today. I touched on this earlier this week. The defense of Cincinnati, I think, is going to still be really good next year. The defense last year was good. Even though the Bearcats lost Malik Vann in week 2 and eventually lost Dante Corleone in the final 2 games of the season, the defense was still really good. I saw them play really well against Indiana. I saw them play really well against Temple. Now, they did struggle in big games. In the 4 games that Cincinnati, lost, in the 4 games they lost, they were gashed. In the running game, teams hit big plays. In the passing game, they were gashed. Let's just call it for what it is. They could not stop dynamic offenses, and it showed in those games. And injuries piled up. Now, the good news is there's a change coming, a 4-2-5 defense. I'm really excited to see what a 4-2-5 defense can do. And with that, we bring in the driving force behind all Bearcats at Sports Illustrated. He is Russ Heltman, my colleague at AllBearcats and Sports Illustrated. Russ, how are I hear that there was a snowstorm expected up in Cincinnati and nothing came. Is that true?
Yeah, it's classic Cincy weather. Unpredictable and usually underwhelming, which if you're not in school, it's usually pretty nice for the people that have to commute in the mornings, all that stuff. I am not sad there wasn't traffic issues and snow issues this morning. But great to be with everybody on Locked On. It's a lot to get to this show, as we always have, seemingly every live room.
Seemingly every live room that we have, we'll take your questions and comments in the chat. So let's get rolling right here on Locked On Bearcats.
Our Locked On Bearcats, your daily podcast on the Cincinnati Bearcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
If I didn't mention this, today's live room and today's episode of Locked On Bearcats is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. I'm Alex Frank. He's Russ Heltman, my colleague at AllBearcats and Sports Illustrated. Russ, I know you're into betting. You write betting articles for All Bengals with James Rapine. So how about that? FanDuel Sportsbook coming to the Locked On Podcast Network. Can't beat it.
I'm an avid FanDuel user. Just placed a parlay on some NBA awards this morning. Love FanDuel. Let's get it.
Good times. Sports betting's legal in Ohio. We got the
Yes,
Bearcats in action. Yeah,
we love it. We love the sports betting being legal now. Even more content avenues to dive into. It's great.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I'm looking forward to getting back into to Cincinnati and Ohio. In about 2 weeks, Russ. So you and I will finally cover a game together in 2 weeks. So looking forward to that. But let's get to this because I talked about it earlier this week. The Bearcats defense next year, Russ, it's going to look a little different with new defensive coordinator Brian Brown, but I think it is for the better. So how important is this change defensively from a 3-3-5 to a 4-2-5 going to be, in your opinion?
I don't know if importance is the word I would use. I don't think it's going to be as a change in importance from how great the Black Hats 3-3-5 defense was under Luke Fickell and Mike Tressel over the past 3 years. I think it's just going to be a little different, maybe a little bit more aggressive. But all in all, I don't know the difference is going to be that glaring in terms of impact, in terms of players we expect to be in the roles they're holding right now and the roles that they held last year. In terms of the strength of the team, once again, Alex, I think you'd agree with me, being that defensive line and that linebacking core coming back next season as it was in 2022. So I don't know. I don't think there's that much difference, and especially that much of a difference in expectation out of this group compared to an offense that lost a lot more pieces and is a lot more of an unknown in terms of what we're going to see scheme-wise and what we're going to see personnel-wise at the quarterback position, at running back position, at the starting wide receiver position, at the starting offensive line position, at the starting tight end position. Oh, wait, I literally just named every single starting group you can have on an offensive unit, and that's the biggest question mark, I think, on this team right now, more so than the defense of Brian Brown, which, in my opinion, will be something that this program tries to lean on in the first 2 years of the Big 12 entrance as they just try to go 6-6 this year, try to make a bowl game, try to hold serve before bringing in more and more talent. Hopefully, if you're a Bearcats fan, in the recruiting ranks and getting the offense to the heights it needs to be in the Big 12 to compete for not only Big 12 titles, but national championships when they're probably most likely able to in the time frame after the 14 playoff moves to a 12-team playoff. I don't see them competing for that 14 playoff over the next couple of years. The goal is to be ready to win the Big 12 and get in that 12-team field in 2024.
All right, so let's go to the offense. New offensive coordinator Tom Manning. What is he going to bring to the running game that can make it better than what it was last year?
With Tom Manning, he's just going to bring development. He's going to bring, I think, a nice wide zone scheme mixed with Scott Satterfield. We'll see how their principles kind of coalesce in this offense, but I think we'll see a pretty sound running attack. I don't know if we're going to get a bell cow back, which has been kind of evading the Bearcats over the past year and a half, ever since Jerome Ford left. They had been using a bell cow in perpetuity. Michael Warren, Jared Dokes, Jerome Ford, those were the bell cows before. Didn't really have that last year, and it led to the inconsistencies that you and I talked about throughout the entire season. So I think with Tom Manning, goal number one is going to be, who are my aces in the hole at running back? Who are my lead rushers going to be? Is it going to be Ryan Montgomery? Is it going to be Corey Kiner? Is it going to be Miles Montgomery? Stephen Bird, maybe a freshman, develops in the offseason a little bit. He comes out of nowhere. That's goal number one, I think, for this rushing attack, finding that perfect player to mold your scheme around and then building everything off of it. But as I said when looking at the offense, it's just very difficult to give the media what you think or what you want the scheme to look like when you haven't even seen your own personnel on the field with any kind of scheme that you're trying to work with them on.
Yeah, something I talked about yesterday, and you mentioned it, Russ, the inconsistencies in the running game last year. And I talked about during the season how the interior of the offensive line was a big reason for it, that they could not run the ball up the middle. And I also said in the offseason last year, Russ, many times, the Bearcats are at their best when they've had bell cow running backs like Jerome Ford, like Michael
Right.
Warren, like Isaiah Pete. I mean, you go all the way back to Isaiah Pete. When the Bearcats have had a bell cow running back, that's what's always worked for them. Now, here's a question I have for you. So on today's show, today's episode, Locked On Bearcats, which you can watch on YouTube or listen on audio anywhere you get your podcast, free and available. Something I said, I ranked the 15 transfers who have committed to Cincinnati so far, and I put Luke Kandra at number 1. And I said that because A, the offensive line has been a strength over the last 5 years, but now needs rebuilding, as you said earlier. B, because the Bearcats historically are a run-first offense, and if you don't have a strong interior offensive line, the running game is going to struggle. And Luke Kandra, Russ, as we know, is, he's played guard. He played guard at Louisville, and I think he would project as a guard potential starter at Cincinnati. Do you agree with Luke Kandra being the most, in terms of not best player, but in terms of most valuable transfer commit? Is Luke Kandra at the top for you?
I'd say he's up there. I'd probably have maybe one of the receivers up there as well. Sling Burkhalter, I think he could be the most impactful player out of this transfer portal class. Donovan Olney also up there as well. I think a guy that's kind of going a little under the radar, but has a chance to make a big impact is Joey Belgian, the Western Kentucky transfer, nice red zone target that's coming over and most likely will start alongside Shimon Mater and Peyton Singletary, kind of rotation there in that tight end group. But I kind of do agree with you, Alex. I do agree in the fact that Luke Kandra, I think, and Trevor Radisevich, for that matter, those two guys in the middle there, and pick your poison. Radisevich, I think, expected to be the starting center, moving Gavin Gerhardt either to left guard or right guard in that scenario. You're only as good as your offensive line in the sport of football for the most part. And if your offensive line does not meet the standard that they failed to meet last year, you're not going to meet the standards that your fan base has for this program. So I think it all starts up front. I would probably agree with you there. I would lean Luke Kandra and Trevor Radisevich. Those guys I think have the potential to have the biggest impact. And then going with Luke Kandra, the pedigree, the hometown hero, already played under Scott Satterfield, should be as seamless as a transition as possible in that Satterfield system. I could get on board with that. Yeah, I like that pick.
Now, you said Sterling Burkhalter. He comes from North Carolina A&T. The Bearcats have 3 other wide receiver transfers who come from Power 5 schools, but you mentioned him first. Is there a reason for that?
I just love what I've seen on tape from Burkhalter. I think he's got untapped potential, a little bit more potential, higher ceiling than Diamond Ollie out of Washington State. And I just think Burkhalter's got a little bit more big play ability to be able to get that done. But a guy that we haven't even talked about, Alex, and I think it's because it's been so long since we've seen him hit the heights that the number 1 impact transfer would have to hit to be able to own that mark. And that's Emory Jones, former top 100 recruit, transfer from Arizona State. You hope, if you're a Bearcats fan, that Emory Jones hits that ceiling that he hasn't hit in his college career. And if he does do that this season, then he will definitely be the most impactful transfer. But there's just been so much inconsistency, such a bad showing at Arizona State, gets benched midway through the year. It's definitely trending in a different direction compared to what Luke Kandra and guys in that offensive line unit have going in their favor coming into this program versus Emory Jones, who is expected to be the starting quarterback, but there's a lot of quarterbacks still in that room, Alex. And that to me speaks to this coaching staff laying it on the line to these players and saying, we're going to go through the spring. We're going to lay out how we feel about everybody at the end, and we can kind of make our decisions from there. But you have the opportunity to either leave now or compete for that starting job that I'm pretty sure hasn't been handed to Emory Jones, or we would have seen a larger exodus out of that quarterback room, which was, correct me if I'm wrong, I think has 6 players in it as we speak right now.
It's got a lot. It's going to be a big battle throughout the spring and into fall camp. Let me ask you this. Is Emory Jones right now the front runner to be the starter heading into spring practice, which starts in about 6 weeks, Russ?
I would say yes. Just default front runner to be the starter. Ben Bryant didn't do anything last year to make you think he should be the odds-on favorite to be the starter. Evan Prater, you and I have spent plenty of time talking about how poorly he performed in those 2 starts afforded to him at the end of the season. great competition or not, you're going to have to play a lot of great competition in the Big 12, and you're going to be asked to perform if you're the starter for this program. That doesn't really hold up as an excuse for me, and he's got to get a lot better. So, yeah, as of right now, it would be a shock to see a guy like Brady Drogosh get a start in his freshman year, true freshman season. So, yeah, Emory Jones is the front runner as we speak.
Okay, so here's something that I've talked about on this show this week. How much of a rebuild is this offense going into? Because I ran this yesterday, Russ. So last year, there were 29 first-year head coaches in college football. 29.
Okay.
12 had winning seasons, including former Bearcats defensive coordinator Marcus Freeman. 5 finished 500. So more than half of your first-year head coaches last year, Russ, finished 500 or better. That's encouraging. 11 of the 29 first-year head coaches are offensive-minded. 8 of them saw increase in offensive yards per game from 2021. So that offers some hope for the Bearcats offense this year. But how much of a rebuild exactly is this Bearcats offense in right now?
A pretty heavy rebuild, to say the least, Alex. When you lose, I mean, outside of the running back position, they've lost everything. They've essentially lost everything. You've lost your entire offensive line, save for Gavin Gerhardt. You've lost and Dylan O'Quinn, who I think that one may have slipped through the cracks over the past few weeks, but many people were saying O'Quinn not expected to come back. So we'll see if he eventually does. It feels like I would have to go through that after the show, but for the most part, you've lost 4 out of 5 day one starters on this offensive line. You've lost your top 6 pass catchers. And to me, that just speaks to a full rebuild. You don't have a starting quarterback now. That's a full rebuild in a nutshell. It would only be a complete, utter 100% rebuild if they also lost Ryan Montgomery, didn't come back, Corey Kiner transfers, and Miles Montgomery also transfers. Then you're looking at a completely torn down to the studs unit. Thankfully, that did not happen. You retain Montgomery for his extra year of eligibility. You retain Kiner as a hometown hero, and you keep Miles Montgomery in the fold for what should be a nice position group to lean on in the earlier part of the season, I would imagine. But if that would have gone up in smoke, then yeah, you're looking at a completely torn down to the studs rebuild, and this is more of a 80% out of 100% rebuild in my eyes.
Wow. I mean, I look at the offensive linemen on this roster, and I mean, they have not seen much action. That concerns me. And I look at the wide receivers. Wyatt Fisher's the only player from last year's Bearcats team to have a catch. This wide receiver room, and I want to see what Chris Scott can do. I think Donovan Ollie brings experience, and I think D. Wiggins has potential. Keyshawn Helton does too, but I just don't know right now. And
none of those guys are studs. None of those guys are day one walking in the door, Blitnikoff award watch list, to say the least.
Okay.
So you and I have talked about Sterling Burkhalter. We just talked about D. Wiggins, Keyshawn Helton. Those guys are looking for new opportunities for a reason. And Burkhalter, the reason I brought him up is because he's leveling up in situation. He is choosing UC out of many other options where he can go and further upgrade his status in college football versus D. Wiggins, Keyshawn Helton, Donovan Ollie less so, but D. Wiggins and Helton dealing with a ton of injuries in their careers and just trying to find a stable spot to finish their careers. With Wiggins, a guy that transferred to Louisville last year, gets hurt game 3, I think, of the season, was expected to be a big contributor, and then follows Scott Satterfield to Cincinnati the following year. So, yeah, on the pass catching unit, they brought in solid talents, but as I mentioned, nobody that's going to wow you and think, hey, that's Marty Gilliard walking in as a transfer, coming in and ready to set the UC record for yards amassed in one season, touchdowns scored, catches, all that stuff. And then with the offensive line, Dylan O'Quinn not expected to come back. You got a starting pool of guys like Tanya Tinsley, Ethan Green, Philip Wilder. Forgot to mention him as a transfer. Two other transfers we talked about a lot: Trevor Radasavis and Luke Kandra. Gerhardt, who I mentioned, John Williams, Cam Jones, maybe Mal Glenn, maybe Luke Dalton. All those are brand new names, Alex, outside of Gavin Gerhardt and maybe D'Artagnan Tinsley a little bit in mop-up duty here and there last year. A new look offense, to say the least.
Definitely. It'll be interesting to see what it looks like and who stands out in spring practice, which starts in about 6 weeks. All right, coming up, we'll hit the hardwood. A tough loss for the Bearcats on Sunday against Memphis. I got a story, an analysis on the Bearcats' three-point shooting on All Bearcats. We'll get into that. We'll get into Saturday's game against the Houston Cougars. But first, I'm here to tell you that today's episode of Locked On Bearcats, today's live room, is brought to you by FanDuel. So, the NFL playoffs are here. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the #1 sports book in America, and that is FanDuel. If you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. New customers join today to get started with $150 in free bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just sign up at FanDuel.com/Locked On. The AFC Championship Sunday, the Bengals and the Chiefs. Right now, the Bengals, according to FanDuel, are a 1-point favorite. A 1-point favorite to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. I like that, and I like the Bengals to cover that. So, just sign up at FanDuel.com/Locked On. FanDuel has all your favorite bets from the money line to point spreads to player props. Plus, you can even combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. All on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So football fans, don't miss out. Place your first $5 bet to get $150 in free bets, win or lose, at FanDuel.com/Locked On. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thanks again for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen every day. Make sure you check out our brand new podcast, Locked On College Basketball. Everything you need to know about college basketball all in one place. Plus, hear from big-name experts, insiders, coaches, and players. Locked On College Basketball is available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Back here, Locked On Bearcats live room Wednesday. Russ Heltman is my colleague at AllBearcats and Sports Illustrated. I'm Alex Frank. I've got a story up on AllBearcats about the Bearcats' three-point shooting, which there are some things when you look at it, and this was all based on a comment I saw from a fan about who's taking the most three-point shots. We'll get to that here in a few minutes. But, Russ, first off, the Bearcats lose Sunday to Memphis, a tough game. They lose 75-68. Do you and from what you've said on this show and from what I've talked about, and I want to ask you again, do you sense with 10 games remaining, the time is running out on this team to start building that resume for an at-large bid to the NCAA tournament?
Oh, time's run out. Oh, it's done. This team is done. The season's over unless they beat Houston on the road Saturday, which I don't know if anybody's given them a chance to do that, especially given the fact that Houston just got a kick in the face on this past weekend, 56-55 at the hands of Temple. That is not the situation you see wanted to go into. Because now Houston, if they weren't motivated to finish out the season strong before that loss, they assuredly will be now. And it's just too many missed opportunities for the Bearcats. I break it down almost every single preview pop rent. We dive into the keys to the game, what they have to do. But the bottom line, the consistency in terms of available talent and the talent showing out on the floor night to night is just not there outside Landers Nolly, and Victor Locken for the most part, although the shooting has tailed off a little bit lately. Got back to against Memphis, but wasn't his best game overall, I would say. Outside of those two guys, it's been hard to find players that night in, night out, you know exactly what they're going to give you. Micah Adams-Woods, a perfect example. They needed more from him in the Memphis game. They needed him to be much better against those guards, much better against Kendrick Davis, and it just didn't happen. Did not get the performance they needed out of him. And now you see sits in a position that they've been in since Wes Miller started. I like the guy a lot. I think he's a good coach. I do. But at some point, at the University of Cincinnati, you have to start winning some modicum of a big game. I'm not even saying winning a ranked contest. I'm not even saying beating a top 25 team, a top 50 team, a top 60 team in Memphis, in UCF. Those are the wins that have to start happening on a more consistent basis, or the cries and the bemoaning from fans is going to get louder and louder. Year two, I get it. The guy needs, I think, one more year, two at the most. If he starts to show some progress next year, he needs to be given that time to get his classes in, get his players in, and get them ready to go. But Alex, they're 0-6 this season in quad 1 and quad 2 games. 0-6, including I think 3 losses in those games at home to Memphis, Houston, and Xavier. At some point, this program has to win a big game for the first time since late November 2021.
No question about it, Russ. I mean, that's just the bottom line. Close is not good. Close is no longer good enough. Like the Bearcats, yeah, they played Arizona tough. Okay, great. They played Xavier tough. All right, fine. Xavier's really good. We know that. But at some point, you're going to have to start to win these games because, I mean, yeah, time is running out. Now, if they miraculously beat Houston on Saturday, hey, maybe we'll, sing a different tune next Wednesday. But if this
the doomsday clock gets some minutes lopped off a little bit at that point, but even then, they're still in a bad scenario.
It's just so frustrating to me because, and I said this earlier this week, like we'll talk a little bit about the Bengals in segment 3 to round out the show, but like I watched the Sunday was a big sports day in Cincinnati. You know this, listening to this live room or in podcast form. Sunday you had the Bearcats at 1, and then the Bengals and Bills at 3 in the playoffs. Russ, what I saw from the Bengals, my biggest takeaway was the confidence and the chip on their shoulder they played with. Where's that from the Bearcats men's basketball team? It was here in the Mick Cronin days. Like right now, Russ, and this is a phrase Mick Cronin used to use all the time. There are guys on the team who, when they get on the bus, are deciding whether or not they're winning. I don't know if this team has that guy right now. I don't know if there's a guy on this team that when they step on the bus, they're going to be that alpha and lead this team to victory. I don't think DeJulius is that guy. I don't think Landers Nolly is that guy. I certainly don't think Jeremiah Davenport is that guy. That's the problem with this team right now, Russ. Do you agree?
I don't know about that. I can't really get into the head of the players in that sense. All I can do is evaluate what I'm seeing on the floor and evaluate the talent. The talent's not there. Now, next year, it could be there. It's very possible that they could be a competitive team in the Big 12. Possibility is a big caveat because now you go on a Big 12 schedule and every single game is going to be that much more difficult compared to, sure, you have Houston this week, but you got a stretch earlier last week where you paired together 3 wins against East Carolina, SMU, and South Florida. They will never face a 3-game stretch that easy for the rest of their time in conference play as a Big 12 member. I am confident saying that with how great Big 12 basketball has been over the past 5 years, past 10 years, past 15 years. It's not going away anytime soon. So the fact of the matter is the talent just has to get better. It has to increase. I think you have to find a way to retain Landers Nolly next year. That is a massive, massive, massive goal for this program. Bring him back, have him be your marquee player going into the Big 12. And they should have another year development under Victor Locken. You get your 2 forwards that are getting a ton of great minutes, great development this season, and Dan Skilling and Josh Reed. You get them into being full-time starters in the rotation. You add a transfer or 2 here and there. You bring in your 2 big-name top 50 guards and Jizzle James and Rayvon Griffiths. You're starting to build something there. You're starting to get something rolling. But with this current crew, it's clear that they are not talented enough, especially when you think about in the grand scheme of the Big 12 to compete in that league. But to compete for this AAC title, they just are not consistent enough. And the overall, I think, acumen of the team to be able to buckle down in those big moments and be able to fight for what they believe in, fight for those winning goals there, but they just can't consistently access it because of the talent deficit that they are facing in these top 50, top 60 games. But like I mentioned, Alex, they got the best point differentials in the league because the coaching is so good that when they face these bad teams, it's like light work. The system overwhelms them and they're able to make easy work of them. But when they face these tough teams, it's a perfect example. Last 3 seasons against Memphis, they've lost every single game by 7 points.
Yeah.
They've been the same distance from Memphis every single year.
And it used to not be that way. Memphis used to be a team, the Bearcats, I mean, yeah, it was a big game because this is a rivalry that goes back a long way, but you had the confidence that the Bearcats were going to win the game. I mean, 2019, they beat Memphis twice. Those were games they could have lost. They didn't because Jaron Cumberland took over the first game, and the second game they had a big enough lead that they were able to hold on in the end. But that's not the case anymore, Russ, as you just alluded to. There have been 3 games between the Bearcats and the Tigers since Wes Miller took over. Every single game has been there for the taking. They just simply have not been able to win it. Now, we'll take your questions and comments in the chat here shortly. Give me your analysis. I have the story on All Bearcats. Give me your analysis on the Bearcats three-point shooting, because they are tied for the conference lead. They're 83rd in the country. Those are great. But I feel like, and I said that, I ended my story with this. Time is running out, and I still don't feel like players 100% know their roles, especially when it comes to three-point shooting. What do you make of that?
The bottom line is Jeremiah Davenport, and you brought up a great point. They kind of built the article around this idea. The fact that JD, he's a competitor. He tries hard. He does. I defended him a couple of weeks ago on this show. And ever since I did, after that Wichita State performance, it's been a disaster.
Yeah.
It's been a disaster since then. He's shooting 27% overall from the field since that game. 24% from three on almost 7 attempts per game. That just can't happen. And I don't know if it's the coaching staff still enabling him to shoot these kind of shots. I don't really get it. But all I'm told about Jeremiah Davenport is a guy that thrives more when he takes those more difficult shots. Well, that's just not happening.
No.
He's shooting 31% overall from the three-point line this year. He's averaging 9.3 points per game, lowest since his freshman year. He's having his worst season in the past 3. He doesn't look any better on defense. Doesn't look like he's taken mid-season stride on that sense at all. And at this point, like, Alex, when does the conversation start? As Rob Fennessy, who practiced pretty well yesterday, from what I saw in the Tuesday session, looks like he's returning against Houston. You get John Newman, talk to him the other day. He's in great spirits, seemingly going to return, hopefully, in the next couple of weeks. We'll see if that can happen. When does the benching conversation for Jeremiah Davenport start? That's what I want to know, because he is actively hurting this team's chances to win ball games. As you mentioned, the highest volume three-point shooter on this team, hitting 30% of those shots. Those two things do not compute. And it's a team on offense, and you see that could be elite nationally into just a very good offense.
Great point. That's a really good point. He's not even shooting that well from the field overall. And, like, yes, shooters keep shooting. Not when the shots aren't falling. Russ, the shots are not falling. His scoring average has gone down since he was relegated to the bench. So that's interesting. And Landers Nolley, who shoots 44% from three, has attempted, 12 to 14 fewer threes than Davenport. David DeJulius' shot selection, I think, is good. He's played really well over the last. He played great last Wednesday at South Florida, Russ. He was 7 of 8 from the floor. So
it was his best shooting performance of his career for DeJulius last week.
But
7 of 8 is a perfect example.
Yes.
Can you get 16 shots when you're cooking like that? Can Landers Nolley, when he's 5 of 10 from the field from 3, can you get 14 3-point attempts, 15 3-point attempts? Now that's kind of crazy. I know, I get that, but you get the point that I'm trying to make for the audience here is spam what's working well. Stop spamming what's not working.
Yeah. Davenport is on pace to attempt 36 fewer threes than last year. It's crazy to think about. But
right. And when I mean bench, I obviously know he's not in the starting lineup, but he's still averaging 28 minutes a game. Like, that's basically a starter level minutes. And he's shooting 26% from the field. And it's not just the shooting, Alex. The overall impact on the game has been cut in half since that great performance against Wichita State. 22 points, season high on January 5th. Since that game, he has a 3.7 average game score in each of the 5 following contests. For context, Davenport in the beginning to start the season was way, way better. Before the Wichita State game, going into that contest, he had a 6.8 game score on average in each game. So to have that get cut in half, it's just something is clearly not working. It hasn't worked all season, and we only have 10 games remaining now. It's 66% of the way of the season. You are what you are at this point, player.
Yeah. To quote Bill Parcells, you are what you are. All right, let's get to the chat here, see if we've got any questions and comments. Looks like we do. Paul Burkett says, I'm excited for Daniel Greshik being added to the D-line. Russ, I think that's a great point there. Here's a guy who is a hybrid defensive end linebacker transfer commit. And the Bearcats, I think now are going to have the luxury of having 2 edge rushers, one on each side. And I said it earlier this week. Imagine if that 2021 team had 2 edge rushers on the D-line. Myjai Sanders was double teamed all season. He only had 2.5 sacks. Imagine if they had someone running opposite him. They could have that this year with their defensive line. And Greshik is a great transfer commit for this Bearcats team. Paul also saying Mayo Glenn is still a Bearcat, right? Been waiting on his opportunity. Russ, you just talked about him. He is. To answer your question, Paul, he is. Sab1, do you guys think Miller is the right coach? That's a very interesting question. You say you like him as a coach, Russ. I do too. Does it go back
I think
to
he's the
this
right
team
coach.
not having the talent right now?
Yeah, I think it's just the talent factor. It's the situation he was dealt at the beginning, and I think patience is a great virtue. It's perfect example is the team we're going to finish the show with, the Bengals. They hire Zach Taylor after 3 years. We might not be talking about back-to-back AFC championship runs. So I think 3 years is a great bellwether point for any coach in any profession. 3 years, you get your system implemented, you get your players in by the end of year 2. That 3rd year is when you should expect a really big takeoff. And I think that's when the expectations should really start to rise in most cases, Alex, for a program like the Bearcats. But they're headed to the Big 12 next year. I don't know how high the expectations can really get in year 1 of the Big 12 as you experience that schedule for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, and look at the Big 12 right now, Russ. Kansas has lost 3 straight games to K-State, who I believe lost to Iowa State last night. Kansas also lost to TCU. I mean, not just lost, they got their brains beat in by TCU on Saturday. And then they lose to Baylor. Yes, at home. And they lose on Monday. Oh, and newsflash, they play Kentucky in Lexington this weekend.
Yeah, you get the SEC Big 12 Challenge next year as well for the Bearcats. So
looking forward.
Woo,
looking forward to that. Paul asked an interesting question. What does the money mean from the Big 12? What does the money from the Big 12 mean for the program in real terms? UC's basketball program has done well without a big conference, and due to the fact that the college football playoff is being expanded, including one group of 5 team, would the Bearcats have been in a better position to shine if they remained a big fish in a small pond? I will answer that question right now. Absolutely not. If the opportunity is there to go to the big boys table, you go. I do not care. I don't want to be in the American anymore. The Big 12 is, you're going to get more money. You're going to get better exposure. You're going to get better television deals. You're not going to be playing on ESPN Plus at 2:30 on a Saturday. You're not going to tip off at 9 o'clock on ESPN Plus on a Wednesday night, which is good for Russ because he's got to get up at 5 a.m. every day.
Well, you might, because the Big 12 is the flagship ESPN Plus league.
Okay,
so
that will
fine,
still happen. Fine.
But the money will be much better.
That's fine. That's fine. I can live with that. But you know what? You don't want to play at 4 o'clock on a Saturday in the American Championship game. You want to play at noon on Saturday with Sean McDonough's crew or Chris Fowler's crew calling the Big 12 Championship. I'll put it to you that way, Paul. But an interesting question, but a very simple answer. Russ, we're going to hear from 2 of our sponsors, and then we're gonna round it out with we can get used to this. Another AFC Championship game appearance. We'll get to that after we hear from 2 of our sponsors. Russ, Mo said this. Mo Egger said this. Our good friend said this week, and I'm going to ask you this: was Sunday the most impressive performance in Bengals history, considering what they were up against?
No, I'm still going to go with the AFC title win last year. I'm still going with that, but it's up there. It's definitely top. I'd have to go through the entire 80s, 70s, 90s, not a lot of good stuff in the 90s, the 2000s, 2010s, all that stuff to actually do it. But I wouldn't say it's the number 1 most impressive performance by any Bengals team ever. I think beating that Chiefs team last year with how good they were on the road, as big of a deficit that they faced, 21-3, tied for the biggest championship game, overcame lead in the history of the sport. I think that to me is the biggest accomplishment. But the divisional round is up there.
Tied for biggest comeback in conference championship game history with the 06.
Thank you. That's the way I was trying to say it.
With the 06 Patriots Colts. That was a great game. I know you got to run. Real quick, give me your score prediction for Sunday. Will the Bengals go back to the Super Bowl?
I think they will. I'm rolling with the Bengals.
All right.
I got Cincinnati 28 and the Chiefs 25 on Sunday afternoon. Should be a really great game at 6:30.
Should be. Russ, I know you got to run. Thanks as always for joining me Wednesday afternoons here on the live room. We'll talk to you next week, man. Stay well and stay safe with the weather up there, and I'll see you soon.
Yes, sir, Alex. Hopefully, we're going to see each other in a couple of weeks' time on the beat together. It would be a lot of fun to close out this regular season of Bearcats Hoops. Looking forward to it.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Russ, thanks for joining me. Best wishes to you, and we'll talk to you next week, man.
Yes, of course. You too, Alex.
Thank you, Russ Heltman. Tucker the Rat Wittenberg with a question: When does losing the big games become a coaching issue for basketball? We have the talent to win these games. I can understand Arizona and I can guess Xavier, but we shouldn't lose to Memphis at home. I mean, that's a fair question. Russ talks about this team not having the talent right now. I mean, yes, the Bearcats should not lose to Memphis at home 3 straight years. That's a problem. I mean, but at the same time, I don't know if it's a coaching issue just yet. And maybe if this pattern continues into next year, there's going to have to become a time where you have to win the big game. I don't know if it's right now, but if something goes awry on Saturday at Houston, that question might have some validity to it. I'll save that. Good question, Tucker. Thanks as always for joining us here on the live room. Excuse me. On this Wednesday, this will be in podcast form tomorrow. For those of you listening, if you want to listen again, do we have another question? Looks like we do from Tucker. He said, "Fair enough. Thanks. I'm glad I could answer your question, Tucker." I'm on Twitter at Frankie_Natty with 2 N's and an ATI. I'm on Instagram, AlexFrank9_ and email at alex3frank@gmail.com. Thanks for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen today. For your second listen, check out our brand new podcast, Locked On College Basketball. Experts Isaac Shade and Andy Patton bring you everything you need to know on and off the court. Plus, hear from big-name experts, coaches, and players throughout the basketball landscape. Locked On College Basketball is available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Back tomorrow with a look ahead to the Bearcats in Houston on Saturday, or I should say, if you're listening to this live, Friday. If you're listening on podcast form, back tomorrow previewing the Bearcats and Houston. And I had a topic in my head that was so good, and I already forget what it is, but it's good. I trust me on that. It will be a good topic. It's about offense in the Big 12. So we'll get to that on Friday. And of course, we did this last year. We like to highlight the other teams in our city. Of course, the Bengals in the AFC Championship game Sunday at Kansas City. So I'll do a preview segment on that game. Maybe James Rapine will join me for a little bit. So we'll hopefully hear from him. And thanks as always for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen every day. We're free and available everywhere you get your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name's Alex Frank for Locked On Bearcats. I'm back tomorrow. If you're listening to this on podcast form, Friday, if you're listening to it live right now here on Locked On Bearcats, we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Alex Frank for Locked On Bearcats. Have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you tomorrow/Friday right here on Locked On Bearcats.